Hello everybody, this is Albert with Green Tea House. I hope you're doing well today. Today we're going to talk about one of the most famous, though probably misunderstood teas on the planet, matcha. Now before we begin, I highly recommend you check out our back catalog, in particular the episodes on green tea, and really to go even further back, what is tea, where does it come from, and the best ways to prepare it. Now, matcha. Matcha tea, I think, is probably the most misunderstood tea by Westerners. And I think one of the reasons this is, and the main reason this is the proliferation and popularity of matcha lattes. And so I think a lot of Americans think matcha is meant to be drunk with milk and sugar or milk and some flavoring. And I think, look, there's going to be people who definitely know about the cha, though. They're going to know about the history of matcha tea. But there's a lot of Americans, when they hear matcha, they just think, oh, a matcha latte. And the large majority of Japanese people don't drink matcha that way. They drink it in the ceremonial fashion. So we're going to have a couple episodes on matcha because of its popularity. So today's episode is kind of like just the 101 and drinking it the ceremonial way, how to prepare it and so forth. And then eventually we will have an episode on how to prepare a cold matcha latte and a hot. Because look, as much as I love tea, I'm not some purist and I want to believe that nobody wants matcha lattes and you only want to drink ceremonial matcha latte. And I know that's just simply not true. So what's the fundamental difference between matcha and other green teas? The fundamental difference is with all the other green teas we've talked about, and pretty much every green tea and really every tea on the planet, those teas are steeped. In other words, you're grabbing a leaf, whether it be rolled or in its natural state or cut up like in black tea, CTC, and you're putting it in water, and then you're drinking the infusion of that. Matcha is fundamentally different in that we ground the tea leaf up, and you are then ingesting the entire tea leaf in its pulverized form. So similar, though, to other green teas, what do? Like Gyokuro, which is a high-end Japanese sencha, they're going to shade the plant, the Camellia sinensis plant that eventually that the matcha is going to come from. They're going to shade it for many days to increase the caffeine level and to increase the sweetness. Then they're going to pluck it. Then they're going to kill green it very quickly, like they do with the other green teas, to prevent oxidation. Then they're going to pick off the stems, so it's the pure leaf, and then they're going to pulverize it. And they, traditionally used to use it like a grinder, like a stone grinder. Nowadays, they it's much more commercialized, but you'll still find places that do it that way. And then you're going to get this paste, I should say this powder. And look, there's tons of cultivars of matcha. We really don't have time to spend on all the different ones that are out there. And there's certainly different quality of matcha out there, but understand the fundamental difference. So matcha is grounded up Camellia sinensis tea leaves, typically the shinsha or the early harvest from the spring, which is in anywhere. If you're in Kenya, India, China, Japan, the earliest plucks of the plant are typically the most highly prized. So while you're not infusing it like you are other tea leaves, you're actually grounding it and then drinking it. And so for one of these reasons, matcha is really important to buy organic. Our matcha is organic because unlike other teas, look, infusing tea leaves into water, if they do have a heavy load of pesticides, you're still going to get some amount of it. But with matcha, you're ingesting the entire tea leaf, and that's been grounded up. Other things about matcha. The chado, right? So historically, matcha, or the idea of grounding up a tea leaf, actually came from China, and then somebody went to visit China way back about 900 years ago and decided to bring this to Japan, and then it was just essentially like institutionalized, where the Japanese ethos is part of the tea ethos, and the tea ethos is matcha. So even though sencha is a more popular tea that they consume day in, day out, matcha is much more woven into the fabric of the typical Japanese worldview, whatever you want to call it. Now, that's not to say that a lot of Japanese people are drinking matcha, ceremonial matcha daily. No, I would say that that's not the case at all. But it's kind of like apple pie in America, right? How often do you eat apple pie? But it's as American as apple pie. So with matcha, maybe some of you have gone to a traditional Japanese ceremony, a chado. It's been some years since I've been to one. The last one I went to was in Hawaii, and that was some time ago. Where I live, and there's not a lot of traditional Japanese tea houses. But you can certainly watch videos on this. We actually have videos at Green Tea House, the website, where you can watch a traditional one, how they dress, how they actually do the tea, and how there's just such a beautiful formality to it. Now, we sell the powder to make matcha, and so I wanted to show you some of the accoutrements that they use for it because it's a little different. So normally when you get the matcha powder, you only need to get about a half a teaspoon or a gram. And you can get one of these scoopers. And then what you do is you get the scooper and then you put it in this to sift it out. Okay, you put it in there, sift it out. And then that way you can get all the clumps out before you get it ready. And with the bamboo scoop, Okay, so we're going to talk about like how to prepare matcha at home. So what you can do is you can get a chasaku, that's this, a little scooper, if you want. If not, you don't have to. And you get about a teaspoon, or I should say half a teaspoon of matcha powder out. That's about a gram. You get it out with this. If you have one of these, if not, just use a regular one. And then you want to use a sifter because you want the matcha, sometimes the matcha has clumps in it, and you want to get the clumps out and you want to sift it through here like that. And then you get that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to get that half a teaspoon of matcha powder and you're going to put it in a bowl. Depends what kind of bowl you want to do, but I mean the traditional Japanese bowl is relatively high up because you're going to whisk it with the chowsen. Now the chowsen is a bamboo stick that it's traditionally made from one piece of bamboo, and then they cut it up into these 1,000 pieces. And I'll do a little video here to show you how you should whip it, but you kind of do it in an M shape and you do it pretty fast, and you want to whip it up into a froth. So you get the powder, the half a teaspoon, and you get about 2 ounces of water. Ideally, you want it to be filtered water, but this water doesn't necessarily have to be hot. It can just be 2 ounces of water. You put it in the bowl, and then you put in the half a teaspoon of matcha, and then you whip it until it's all frothy, nice. And then, I would say traditionally, I know I've used that word a lot, you get about 4 ounces of hot water. Now, if you go to a coffee shop, if you go to these places and you get matcha, lots of times they're gonna ruin it. They're gonna put more water and not compensate and put more matcha powder. So the ideal ratio, and again, there's going to be people that are purists or people that disagree, but it's 2 ounces of whipped up matcha water, and then you add 4 ounces of water. Now, if you want more matcha than 6 ounces, then add more matcha powder. And certainly if you want more of a caffeine kick, then add a lot more matcha powder and less water. It's really ultimately up to you. Now, the matcha temperature should be about 160. We talked about this on the episode, what temperature should you steep your tea? And matcha is one of the lower ones. I'd say gyokuro is also kind of a low one, but matcha, this is one of the cardinal mistakes that coffee shops do. If you ever get just matcha on its own, is they'll use espresso hot water in your matcha. And I'm talking about if you're drinking matcha with no latte, just the matcha and water. And this makes, as we've talked about many times, when you use too high of a temperature on any green tea, and especially matcha, you're going to make it really stringent. You're going to make it really bitter. And this is one of the many reasons I tell you, be careful when you get tea at a coffee shop, because just out of ignorance, a lot of these places, these baristas just don't know, and they over nuke the water. So you want to use about 160 degrees. So if you've ever been to a Japanese tea ceremony, you'll see that once they prepare it for you, you drink it immediately. So it's not like a tea where you have to blow on it or wait till you can drink it. It's supposed to be potable or drinkable immediately. So I would do 160, 165 when you pour in that 4 ounces of water, and then whip it, and drink it. So that's ceremonial matcha. Now there's different levels of matcha. The Ichiban or number 1 is the best. We call that the high-end ceremonial matcha. That stuff can be really expensive, but it's the best quality. You're getting the shinsha, the early harvest of really good cultivars, of really good leaves. So matcha as a whole can be a little more expensive. You'll notice here what the matcha we sell is a little more expensive than if you're getting sencha because it's just higher quality leaves. So you have that. Then you have lower level matchas. And so like the lower level matchas will be used for the matcha lattes because the lower level matchas tend to be a lesser grade. And so they blend better with milk and sugar. And then you have the lowest level matcha will be like the culinary matcha, which is used if you want to make matcha brownies, matcha muffins, matcha cakes, and so forth. So the key with matcha is understand it's a green tea, it's Japanese, you're congesting the whole tea leaf, and you don't need to have a chowsen and all these things, but ideally it's the best way to mix it up. You drink it as is. That's the way it's meant to be drunk. When you go to Japan, that's how they will drink matcha when they do drink matcha. Here we've kind of bastardized matcha by making it almost like the McDonald's of matcha by doing the matcha latte, either cold or heated. But it's traditionally drunk as is, but room 160 degrees, you drink it as is. And good matcha has such a great taste to it, and it gives you a really good caffeinated buzz. As a whole, 6 ounces of matcha is going to be pretty high for tea caffeine, but it's up there with Gyokuro. But understand, remember, we've talked about in the caffeine episode how the tea leaves have theanine, and what theanine does, theanine is an enzyme that prevents the spiking of caffeine like you see in coffee or if you eat a lot of candy. So when people drink from the tea plant, you are getting a good caffeine kick, but it's more of a steady jolt. It's more of a steady thing that gives you alertness instead of like a jolt. So enjoy matcha. As I mentioned, future episodes we'll talk about how to make a matcha latte. Until next time, post in the comments. Take care. God bless.